Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What's moving through my heart these days is the question of surrender. What surrender is and what surrender isn't, especially around the question of what is healthy surrender. Surrender is our deepest longing, and one might say our deepest nature. The prostration of the heart was given to us as part of our creation, that we say, yes, you are my Lord. So there's a place in all of us that knows what sweet and healthy and complete surrender feels like. I think, however, most of us also have a feeling inside of what unhealthy surrender feels like too. Times when we have felt suppressed or oppressed. A kind of submission was asked of us. It happens very often when we are children. For some of us, it's still happening as adults. And there also a quality, a healthy quality of, no, this is not right. And we have in our body both of these feelings. We have in our body both of these knowings. Sometimes they might get a little bit tangled up inside. Sometimes because of the strength of these feelings, but without a great deal of awareness and possibly discernment and discussion around them. They may even get kind of tangled up in ways that create a push-pull, or in ways that cause us to need to sacrifice the health of one side for the other in either direction. Meaning, it may be that in order to fulfill our healthy longing to surrender to Allah, to the path, to the guide, to our teachers, to our healers as they hold us, in our longing to say yes to that surrender, we may be suppressing parts of ourselves that in health deserve to have backbone, autonomy, personal development, the ability to question, the ability to develop our own discernment. And if we are squashing that in order to say yes in complete obedience and surrender, that is a form of spiritual bypass. It is a form of remaining a child and not grappling with some difficult things inside of ourselves and taking responsibility inside of ourselves for the sake of the pleasure of our surrender. Though it can go in the other direction as well, out of a deep dedication to our own walking, our own development, our own discernment, our own independence, and our developmental process of coming into our own maturity, we may sacrifice the incredible help that can come to us, the riptide level of pull that a teacher or a healer or a path can give to us by just lifting us out beyond our nafs even our heart and our soul and our own secret, we can just be carried very far, very fast, while we may be stubbornly digging in our heels, saying, no, I need to do this myself and walk every step of the way with my own backbone. Both of these are what I will call an error of respect or an error of truth, in that there is truth in both sides. And that when we err by surrendering in such a way that we're actually spiritually bypassing our own developmental maturity, our own backbone, our own responsibility to, be a grown-up. Or when we say, no, I need my independence, and I'm not going to allow myself to be carried by the guide. In both cases, we are making a mistake, one could say, for healthy reasons. And in both cases, something is lost. I would say that this is an important matter for further discussion in our community. What is healthy surrender? What does it feel like, both in its beauty and in its refusal to take shortcuts through what it means to be an upright human? We are in sujud and we are in qiyam. Are we in both prayer positions and all of them in between? What does unhealthy surrender look like and feel like, with respect, so that we can know, hey, that's not what's being asked of us? How does that feel? How do we know it? How do we taste it? And when they're twizzled up inside of us or twizzled up inside of our community, what kind of discussions, what kinds of discernments, what kinds of questions, what kinds of sharing of experience would help us to become more clear?
Alhamdulillah.
Questions, comments, thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, I guess the most superficial question at the moment is the distinction between complete surrender to Allah, Most High, versus what it is to surrender to a guide or a sheikh. And are they different? And is that what you're talking about? What is to relate? What kind of, who are you concerned about us being in surrender to? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Ideally, my sense is that it's not different to surrender to Allah than to surrender to the sheikh. I understand that this may be a somewhat radical idea for some, because as we surrender to Allah, this also is a matter of refinement over time. Am I surrendering to Allah, or am I surrendering to my ideas? Am I surrendering to my theories? Am I surrendering to what I believe that it means to be a good Muslim? Or am I actually surrendering to Allah? Am I becoming some kind of, like, I have seen people believe that surrendering to Allah means becoming a kind of mindless automaton that has none of its own thoughts and feelings, which is a spiritual bypass. Yes, perhaps at the height of full development, that may in fact be true. However, there's no skipping steps to getting there. Even the prophets wept frequently. And so what is healthy surrender to Allah without spiritual bypass? This is an important question. And it may essentially be the same question as surrendering to the guide, because surrendering to the guide, I believe that Sidi makes this actually rather clear, that when we surrender to the guide, this is not the same as surrendering to Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal Arafaya Shadaliya.
Right.
It's not to the humanity of the guide that we are surrendering. This means that just as in our surrender to Allah, the process of coming into a true and healthy surrender to the guide is probably not something we are capable of right away until our heart is capable of making that discernment between the man, human, and the guide. To say I am completely surrendered to the guide early or too early, who knows how early is too early, is
Yeah.
to be prone to potentially unhealthy surrender, just like in our surrender to Allah. Do we even have a, like, how well do we know what that even means to surrender to Allah? How well do we know Allah? How well do we know the guide, not the person, not the nafs, not the preference for vanilla Haagen-Dazs ice cream,
Mm.
but that in the guide, which is worth surrendering to, because we surrender only to Allah. And the sheikh is a local representative. It's the same thing with healers. It's the same thing with your year one university student in the role of healer, asking someone to surrender to them as they do a healing. They're not asking the person to surrender to their personality, to their dominance, to their opinions, to their politics, to their ideas, to even what's most wonderful and nice about them. The ask very specifically is surrender to the path of Allah through my heart, home to Allah. I am just a bus stop. I am just a place to connect with something that can carry you further and faster than you could walk. That's it. And this too takes a bit of learning, a bit of education. How do I surrender to a healer, not even a sheikh, just a healer, in a healthy way? Because if we are able to surrender completely and accurately to a healer, wow, can we be carried? What a healing that's going to be. And if we are mal-surrendering, if we are surrendering in a way that's like a dependency, here, carry me like a baby. I can't, I don't have my own backbone, and I'll listen to everything you say and throw all of my own discernment in the trash. This is completely different. I know that as a teacher and as a healer, this happens frequently enough that it's concerning that a student or a client will want to surrender to me in an unhealthy way. I am used to, though not yet as practiced as I would like to be, at recognizing, uh-oh, this person is over surrendering to me. Or maybe over surrender is not quite the right word, but surrendering in a way that is an abdication of their own responsibility and their own potentiality, which may be very underdeveloped, which is why they might be coming to a teacher or a healer, especially at the beginning. But it's still their responsibility and their potentiality. And when that person is not over surrendering and they are in their own backbone and their own discernment, there's a lot more safety in the relationship. My role as teacher or healer is to surrender to Allah in the client and the student so that they can surrender right back again. And it's just Allah with Allah. If they have abdicated and they're being a kind of little human jellyfish or a baby on my doorstep, that interaction between Allah and Allah can't take place. So I'm often wanting, whether it's surrender to Allah, surrender to the sheikh, surrender to a teacher, surrender to a healer, same thing. We're looking at a conversation between Allah and Allah that has a formality to it. And inshallah, over time, a growing clarity such that Allah is strengthened in both places, and that connection that sends us somewhere where we want to go is true and steady and grows wider and wider with no loss of autonomy, no loss of independence, no loss of personal responsibility or potentiality.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So my second question is around it relates to witnessing wherever we're at, whatever state, station, whatever. Acknowledging that what you're perceiving and witnessing shifts and changes over time. And our understanding and tasting of what we're even calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also shifting and changing.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then acknowledging that that clearly comes in stages or states. And I'm wondering, how does that relate to the path of stations that CD lays out for us, and versus like, how do you speak to a beloved moving through the initial stations of the nafs, versus how do you encourage a beloved moving into what might be soul or secret type stations in that continuing journey towards Allah and surrender to Allah Most High as it shifts? What say you to that, my beloved?
What I say is that there's a wonderful phrase that actually I learned from Abdul Rahim Keeley. The phrase, "This is my best sense." It's a very important phrase. It's very different than "this is how it is." And it's very different than, "I don't know." It's kind of a good midpoint between them, right? Because "this is my best sense" is actually a statement of a person's deepest integrity in the moment. From as far as I have walked, me, Mariam, Thea, Elijah, standing or sitting right here, right now, from all of the integrity and all of the alignment that I have come to so far, this is my best sense. And the longer we have walked and the more we have refined, the more that best sense could really carry something. It's why we love going to teachers who have been on the path for longer than we have. Their best sense has a likelihood of being tapped into something. That's really something. So a best sense from someone is not a small thing. It's not "this is how it is," because everybody's best sense is evolving. But it's also not hey, your truth and my truth. It's not your truth, my truth. It's like, no, this is what I've got, my best sense. And when we are speaking from our best sense, we can also speak in that moment to the student's best sense, to what I would call their truth detector or their own best sense detector. I'm saying, this is my best sense, and I'm sending it to the student's heart as an awakening of their best sense, so that they can say to me, I feel that. I feel that. Which is different than, I blindly accept that because you are the teacher or the healer or the sheikh. It's a very different interaction. In an interaction like that, we get to benefit from the experience of those who have done a lot of walking, but not at the expense of our own development. As the teacher speaks to us, we can say, this is the teacher's best sense. What is it resonating with in me? Is it calling me forward? And then the part of me that says, yes, I hear that, is brought forward rather than suppressed or crushed in any way. So that's what I have to say about that.
Alhamdulillah. So then what begins to stir into the mix here is the question of certainty, or the presence of certainty, because we definitely have some strong people in our community for which certainty is very important, and to be able to state Allah is, or something to be stated as that there is no room for ambiguity here. This is just the way it is. And I carry that quality of, this is certain. I'm certain of this. And CD also did talk to us about arriving at these degrees or stations of certainty where you just know it, and it just becomes real. And it's not my best guess or estimate.
Oh,
But at the same time, exactly what Mr. Keeley's brought to you, I do that all the time too. And that feels reasonable and fair and honest, just to be with a beloved and say, as best as I can discern, it's kind of like this, but I'm really not sure. And it's something that we need to work on and keep chewing on together. But that's very different than Allah, and then deliver this quality of certainty that hits you like a lightning bolt, which may or may not be honest.
I think there's a question of adab here, and also a question of transmission.
Okay.
That the question of adab is on both sides. That if somebody else is coming from a place of certainty and we are not quite sure about it, it is in the adab to receive it as, this is this person's best sense, which requires absolutely understanding this is where they stand until they've seen something different. And there's an adab in that, like, yes, that is your best sense. Great. There's also a dab in it on the other side that says, this is my best sense, not as an abdication of certainty whatsoever. I have quite a bit of certainty about quite a few things at this point. Most of them I probably couldn't even put into words, but there lives in me a certainty. Out of adab, I will still say, this is my best sense, but you will hear the ring of transmission in my voice. And then it is up to your heart because that's where I'm speaking to hear when I say, this is my best sense, and then I let through what I am being given to bring through, either that will sound a note in your heart or it will not. So there's no reason not to stand in our certainty. There's no reason not to deliver from where we stand with strength. There's just an adab of, this is my best sense. And then boom, as well as in the listener, no matter whether they say, this is my best sense, it is. That's what it is. So we can know that in our heart on their behalf.
Right. And it may be also just more correct to speak about things of certainty as mostly in the camp of La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, and the existence of Allah and the existence of the angels. And that's maybe that's the frontier edge of certainty. And everything else is more, I don't know, the minutia of our experience, which maybe is not a part of the realm of certainty, you know.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. There may be certainty that comes through on many levels, and there may be certainty that comes through in minutia. My concern is that the transmission be a transmission, not a suppression of the students awakening into their own knowing. Such that even if somebody is both certain and correct, I still want to see that delivered in such a way that it's not a crushing edict or an opportunity for the student to abdicate, but instead an opportunity for the student to have a recognition. Oh, yes. And then comes the surrender. That is the holy surrender.
Right.
In
Right.
matters great and small.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, that does make sense. It feels right. I mean, because when people do come, they are they're looking for hope. They're looking for, does anyone know anything about what's going on here? Is there
Yes.
someone that I can begin to listen to, that we can
Yes.
just point me in the right way to get me started kind of feel?
Right. But
And how do we keep that
take
open?
over, or do we
Yeah,
help them tune their instrument?
exactly. I think
Right
that's
from the
right.
start. Right from the start.
Yeah, yeah. Jay Krishnamurti really did that well when he would work with he didn't even call them students. They were just other human beings. And he was like, my mind, let's look together. Let's see what we can find. Let's engage in serious conversation.
Yes.
Let's see where we arrive.
Yes. It's a different tradition in the outer. And so because Jay Krishnamurti worked in the outer in a different way, the questions around what is healthy surrender didn't arise in the same way that they arise in our tradition and in our Tarika. So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying we ought to be more like Jay Krishnamurti. We
Mm.
are what we are, and we have a particular tradition of surrendering to the healer, surrendering to the teacher, surrendering to the sheikh, surrendering to Allah. And that can be tremendously advantageous if we know what healthy surrender is and isn't, and quite disastrous if we don't.
Mm.
I mean, wow, is it a fast track if we're doing it well? So I'm not knocking it, just honing it.
Yeah. I'm feeling around the edges of that place where there is room for healthy debate, of
Mhm,
questioning,
mhm.
which is kind of different than certainty, but it's also important to like kick tires and to ask some questions that you might be struggling with internally,
Yes,
and how to have that in a way that which is still respectful, um,
yes,
and you're not poo-pooing the whole thing and just saying, "Oh, this is nonsense," but you're just trying to discern, trying to figure out and
yes,
start through it yourself.
yes, that state of I seek to surrender with a sincere heart.
Mm,
And sincerity takes a little jiggling around sometimes. There's some things I need to address in order to be able to surrender with sincerity. I'm not going to bypass or push down those knotted up places or those uncertain places, those unillumined places that don't have the direct knowing yet. So I'm bringing these places in my heart forward because I care about sincerity. I want to be able to surrender completely, and I'm not there yet.
these are meaningful conversations.
I think we should post it, the whole thing.